Hey, good afternoon to you. It's now 406 News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up, Reagan Reese, White House correspondent for the Daily Caller, joins us at 4:30. She'll talk about today's big press briefing with Karoline Leavitt. And then at 5 o'clock, Andrew Arthur joins us from the Center for Immigration Studies. We'll take a closer look at President Trump's crackdown on all of this illegality, as well as the impact that birthright citizenship for illegal foreign nationals. What do the numbers tell us about how frequently that's happening? Andrew brings us the latest. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. President Trump's nominees all being considered and cleared by the United States Senate. But this week, they tell us, is when some of the most controversial nominees are coming up, including for Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, an American war veteran. Here's Senator John Kennedy this week saying that Tulsi is the one who's most on the bubble.
I expect most, if not all, of them to be confirmed. Why? Number one, the president's dug in like a tick. He wants these people. But number two, you've got to remember, these confirmation hearings matter. They matter. If a nominee acts like a complete meathead or starts screaming like he or she's part of a prison riot, people are going to say, whoa, we need to take a second look. But short of that, I think most, if not all, will be confirmed. The one who's most on the bubble, as you know as well as I do, is Tulsi Gabbard.
Pretty sure she's not a meathead or going to be starting any prison riots, though, if I had to guess. Joining us now to discuss all of this, Bernard Hudson. He's a Harvard fellow and a 28-year CIA veteran who oversaw the agency's war on terrorism. Bernard, good to have you with us, sir.
Good afternoon.
Okay. Tulsi Gabbard, what do you think of her nomination to run an intel community that, by the way, has turned her into a victim? She was trafficked in the sky by U.S. air marshals, treated as a terrorist for a time.
Yeah, it's hard to understand exactly why it's so controversial. Somebody who had been a military veteran, a consumer of intelligence at a tactical level, a four-term congressman on the Defense Committee, which has got access to the greatest secrets, military secrets this country has, and intelligence program secrets as well, had been the deputy of the Democratic National Committee. Why is that a controversial pick? In some ways, if you were to take a look at her background, she has more national security experience than President Obama did when he chose to run for president.
Yes, that's right. But she's an enemy to Hillary Clinton. That's a piece of this. Because Hillary Clinton, first of all, has utter contempt for Tulsi Gabbard and considers her to be some sort of, Kremlin puppet or Russia stooge or something. So the power brokers on the left, they really have it out for Tulsi Gabbard, especially since she left the Democrat Party entirely and came out in support of Donald Trump.
Well, I think that's exactly right. I think, number one, she's got a career of asking very hard questions of the elite foreign policy consensus. When you do that, it comes at a price. She did that within her own party. She had a run for president. She was unsuccessful in that, but in doing so, she brought out a lot of criticisms. Probably, I think a lot of folks considered those legitimate criticisms of Hillary Clinton and then Barack Obama's policies, and I don't believe she's ever been forgiven for that.
From your perspective, how important is the role of Director of National Intelligence, and might that explain why there's an effort to blockade her right now? Like, whose situation is put at risk by Tulsi Gabbard taking that role?
So I'd say the most at risk are the people I would call sort of apologists or apostles for the status quo. Gabbard, Lieutenant Colonel Gabbard, is clearly over her career pushed to ask a lot of hard questions. I think she's got a very credible reputation for honesty, integrity, being willing to suffer for her beliefs. It's important to remember that the most important aspect of being a director of national intelligence is you have to have the President of the United States complete confidence. Absent that, it's very difficult to manage that job because you're the president's primary intelligence advisor. And given this particular president, he needs to have, and it's obvious that he was going to want somebody who is of a like mind on foreign policy and where the intelligence community needs to go.
Yeah. Also, I think it's important that she was victimized by the intel community. It strikes me that having that experience makes her a better, a kind of a better overseer of the intel community in terms of trying to prevent it from violating the civil liberties of Americans, don't you think?
Well, she's been a consistent voice for, I think, both having a strong intelligence community, but one that's also in line with constitutional protections.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right about, the sense of her own kind of violation of a price she had to pay for speaking her mind. I think there was a New York Times article that's just come out in the last few hours that tries to explain through leaked sources in the Transportation Security Transportation Screening Center, explaining how she wound up on that watch list. And if you were to read the New York Times story, you sort of get a bit bewildered because it sort of alleges that she attended a Vatican-sponsored event that she was invited to by somebody that the TSC, Terrorism Screening Center, was interested in. And so I kind of don't understand personally, as somebody who spent nearly 3 decades in CIA, why anybody's actually looking at people who are going to Vatican-sponsored events.
Yeah, that opens up a whole nother line of questioning, doesn't it? So the federal government was tracking people who went to Vatican events as if they were adversaries of the United States?
What's hard to understand from the story, and to be fair, it's just come out, is that these sources allege that there was a person of interest, the person's not named in the story, who had invited Tulsi Gabbard to a Vatican-sponsored event on, I think it was an interfaith or peace conference of some sort, and that somehow this derogatory information on this person came to their attention, and it was tied to her presence at a Vatican event. Again, you have to wonder, have we captured all the terrorists that we're looking for, or the Iranian nuclear program?
It's so crazy, though, because for any number of reasons. One is that she's an American war veteran who's served for many years in that capacity. Two, she has been, as you mentioned, a multiple-term congresswoman from Hawaii. Somebody up the chain of command has to have that name come across their desk when they're contemplating whether or not they're going to put spies on her when she's flying inside of these planes. And nobody's paused to say, okay, this is crazy. We shouldn't be spying on Tulsi Gabbard.
So the watch list program is a good example of something that was a credible idea at one point, but a failure to do exactly what you've talked about, to approach this with deliberation and a lot of thought and circumspection before you put names on there. It inevitably leads to situations like this.
Yes.
Now, the Terrorist Screening Center would say that they took her name off the list. This is according to the story that's come out. But boy, you do have to wonder what sort of intelligence analyst would look at the fact that this is a person who'd been a presidential candidate, currently has a top secret clearance in the military, and part of the predicating information or the derogatory information you're looking at includes attended a Vatican event. That's very, very peculiar.
Yes, it's very peculiar, but it's par for the course out of an administration that has targeted their political opponents so brazenly, which is, why I think it's just so out of control. This role, Director of National Intelligence, has been occupied by people who have openly violated civil liberties of Americans before. James Clapper lied to Congress about the NSA and how much data it was collecting on American citizens. And I'm willing, I bet you there are going to be people who are very supportive of James Clapper who this week intend to vote against Tulsi Gabbard, don't you think?
Well, I mean, we've had directors of national intelligence of Real Haynes, who was the recently departed director, who had actually less experience than Tulsi Gabbard did when Avril Haines was made deputy director of CIA, and arguably when she was made director of national intelligence. So, again, a 4-term congressman tactical consumer of intelligence, strategic consumer of intelligence,
Yes.
has the president's confidence. Despite all of that, I would agree with you. I think there'll be a lot of criticism, and it's sort of hard to keep it straight in your head. Do they dislike her because she's a friend of Assad, allegedly, or she was too soft on Russia, or apparently, attending the wrong sort of event at the Vatican?
Yeah, no, and the Assad thing is also really over the top. They've made her out to be some awful person for having met with Assad at one point, who, by the way, she considers to be a war criminal, and she said so out loud. So it's this is there's a lot of lying going on around Tulsi Gabbard. If this week, Bernard Hudson, you see the Senate vote against her to become the director of national intelligence, or whenever they take that vote, what lesson are you going to take away from that? My impression is that Democrats are mostly going to be in lockstep against her because they see her as a turncoat, and some Republicans might vote against her because they're owned by an intel community that doesn't want her at the top.
I believe she'll ultimately be confirmed because she's fully qualified for the position.
Yes.
However, I do think this is a good opportunity to see what really happens when you're willing to take on a foreign policy consensus in a town that in many ways is built on a foreign policy consensus. And I think a fair review of the last 20 plus years of American foreign policy and intel policy, we could do with some shaking up.
That's for sure. Okay, Bernard Hudson, a longtime CIA veteran, Harvard fellow. Really appreciate your time, sir, and your thoughts on Tulsi Gabbard today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to talk to you. All right, there he is. This is, so it reminds me, actually, you go back in time to Chuck Schumer's thoughts on all of this in the intel community and how you're not supposed to mess with them, right? Remember, he said that if you cross the intel community, if you go against the intel community, they have 6 ways from Sunday to get after you. And Rachel Maddow nodding along as she's interviewing Chuck Schumer. Now, she's supposed to be some defender of quote, progressive ideals. Apparently, progressive ideals are full-blown fascism. That's what she stands for. Because the concept here is to allow the state to absolutely crush political dissenters. Criticize the intel community, have your life destroyed. Huh? And so Tulsi Gabbard has been on the receiving end of that. Like, unfortunately, quite a few patriots who've been on the receiving end of that. This tyranny at the hands of our government. And so it makes her the perfect person. Someone with military experience, someone with a classified security clearance, someone who's been a U.S. Congresswoman, someone who actually has the open eyes to be able to recognize, to be able to recognize where her party was erring, and then she leaves the Democrats, joins the Republicans, joins Donald Trump, and it's for this reason. It's to right-size the government, to fix the intel community. She has been through the fire. And here she is this week being considered by the Senate. And the fact that she's even, as John Kennedy puts it, Senator Kennedy, on the bubble is a sign of how captured Washington is. It's not a sign of her own deficiencies. It's a sign of Washington's deficiencies and whose interests they're zealously guarding. They're not yours. And so we'll see this week. You've got 3 nominees this week that the media are salivating over in terms of scandalizing. And among them, RFK Jr., who will be considered tomorrow in his confirmation process. Make America healthy again. And then Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel on Thursday. And this effort to take down Tulsi, get ready. Get ready. You think this is crazy. We've already got this piece out of the New York Times, as you just heard Bernard talking about, Bernard Hudson. The headline, a Vatican meeting added to scrutiny of Tulsi Gabbard's foreign travels. That's lunacy. A Vatican meeting? And what we're going to get next is we are going to get intel community corrupt attacks on Tulsi over the course of the next few days. That's my expectation. They'll be filtered through compliant media outlets who are going to rush out to tell you some other scandal that they just found out about and they need you to know about, and Tulsi's so compromised, and Tulsi this, Tulsi that, meant to scandalize her to the point that they can convince just enough senators to vote against her. That's what they want. This is the attempt. And they're going to be pressuring these senators too. The ones that, especially the ones that they own. This is a fight worth taking on for us to win. President Trump trusts Tulsi Gabbard in this role. And so I do too. I hope she can make it through. But she's in for yet another fight, and she's had a lot of those. Hey, good afternoon to you. 436 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up today, we will be joined by Andrew Arthur at the Center for Immigration Studies at 5 o'clock. A big conversation with him ahead on the impact that so-called birthright citizenship has had on the country, especially as illegal aliens arrive here, give birth to what the government at the moment considers American citizens. You know, what are the numbers there? What does that actually look like? The Center for Immigration Studies has dug in. We've got that coming up. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. A White House press briefing today. The first one with Karoline Leavitt. The President of the United States has been doing a lot of these, talking to the press a lot over the course of the last week. But Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, doing her first official briefing today. She had a lot to say about the effort to get control of the border. She had this exchange with the Daily Caller's Reagan Reese about all the federal money that's been used to traffic human beings into our country.
Reagan, since you're in the back row, I hear you. The back row hasn't gotten much attention in the last 4 years, so I'm happy to answer your question.
And I can project. Does the president intend to permanently cut off funding to NGOs that are bringing illegal foreign nationals to the country, such as Catholic Charities?
I am actually quite certain that the president signed an executive order that did just that, and I can point you to that.
Some confirmation from the White House that hundreds of millions of dollars of federal taxpayer funding is set to be cut off from the very organizations who have been bringing human beings deep into our country. Joining us now to discuss all of this, Reagan Reese, White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. Reagan, good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Vince.
Okay, so I'll just start with that question. You know, that brings us some confirmation on to what extent the president is locking down this funding that has been used to aid and abet the violation of our country's laws.
Yeah, I think it was, and I said this to my editors while I was sitting there in the briefing room. Caroline got a lot of questions today about the order from the OMB to temporarily pause certain grants and funding for different initiatives throughout the country. And there was a lot of questioning about, what funding is being revoked from people who really need it.
Right.
And I think our question was a great question that got back to the heart of why the Trump administration made such a move, or made a move like this, is they want to take taxpayer dollars that are going to bad things and give them back into the nation and give them, good purpose. And so Caroline's answer here is actually that the funding was restricted through an executive order, which was really great to know. And I have heard this from many people since I've gotten out of the briefing, that this executive order went under the radar and that people did not know that the president signed it. And this is something that people are very passionate about. So, having the opportunity to highlight that and, get back to really what all of these executive orders and these moves that the Trump administration are making on funding, I think was really important in this briefing.
Yeah, and there's a range of groups. It's not just Catholic Charities that are doing this. There's also Jewish Family Service and Lutheran Immigrant and Refugee Services. They call it Global Refuge. It's a range of non-governmental organizations that have taken in a lot of money in order to be. So what was happening during the Biden era is that the Border Patrol would take people into custody, then by the order of the Biden administration, release all of these illegal foreign nationals into the hands of these NGOs, which are taking tons of federal cash to then move everywhere all over the country, bring everyone in. This is a system that has aided and abetted the invasion of the country, Reagan.
Yeah, definitely. And, one thing that has been really interesting about the Trump administration, and I think has been talked about in our newsroom, is that we kind of all expected the Trump administration to kind of take a couple weeks to kind of get its footing and then start making some big moves. And what we've seen was from the minute that President Trump has taken office, he has signed a flurry of executive orders taking significant action And now they're doing this widespread exodus where they're removing illegal immigrants from the country. And so this executive order that Karoline touched on here is just another example of this, I believe, where the Trump administration is serious, that this isn't a lame duck administration, as I've heard a lot of mainstream media critics call it. This is an administration that means business.
Yeah, that's funny. That's really funny. Well, the left, and that includes the legacy media broadly, are desperate to try and scandalize the Trump presidency out the gate. And they haven't yet quite settled on what that will be. There was an effort today. Here's NBC's Pete Alexander sitting in the press briefing room, trying to make it a big deal that not all of the illegals who've been arrested have been violent criminals.
President Trump, during the course of the campaign in 2024, said the following about illegal immigration. He said, they're going back home where they belong, and we start with the criminals. There are many, many criminals. NBC News has learned that ICE arrested 1,179 undocumented immigrants on Sunday, but nearly half of them, 566 of the migrants, appear to have no prior criminal record besides entering the country illegally. Is the president still focused exclusively, which is a civil crime, not a
criminal crime?
Criminal.
Federal crime.
So I'm asking though. He said he was going to focus on those violent offenders first. So is violent offenders no longer the predicate for these people to be deported?
The president has said countless times on the campaign trail, I've been with him at the rallies, I know you've been there covering them too, Peter, that he is focused on launching the largest mass deportation operation in American history of illegal criminals. And if you are an individual, a foreign national, who illegally enters the United States of America, you are, by definition, a criminal. And so therefore, you are subject to deportation.
I apologize for interrupting. So to be clear, it's not violent criminals do not receive precedence in terms of the deportations taking place.
The president has also said two things can be true at the same time. We want to deport illegal criminals, illegal immigrants from this country, but the president has said that, of course, the illegal criminal drug dealers, the rapists, the murderers, the individuals who have committed heinous acts on the interior of our country,
are the targets. Unequivocal and unashamed. How different is it to have Karoline Leavitt up there versus Karine Jean-Pierre?
Where do you start? I think that Karine, yes, it was the first briefing of the Trump administration today, but at no point during the Biden administration did I ever witness a briefing room that packed. And I think that also just speaks to the fact that Karoline gives answers to questions and that she is willing to engage with the media, even if she doesn't agree with them. She took questions from NBC. She took questions from CNN. And, she even took questions from the back of the room. And so taking out the questions from outlets that she disagrees with or that are hostile towards the president, and then also taking questions from journalists standing off to the side. And like I just mentioned, the back of the room is more than Karine ever did in the briefing. And so that already is a big difference that I noticed. Also, she's not snarky or condescending when she's answering these questions that are intended to be gotcha questions. I always found Karine to be rather disrespectful when talking to journalists that she disagreed with. And Karoline, I found to be polite, even in situations that were more hostile today.
Yeah, no, it seemed like that. Can you talk a little bit about what her strategy is for the briefing? Because, she came out today, and one of the first things she laid out was that she does not intend to focus on only questions from the legacy press, and instead is apparently opening up some of the seats to independent and new media in a way that's never been done before. What did she detail today?
Yeah, well, first, Vince, just before the briefing started, some journalists around me asked me if I heard of any changes that were coming. And I said, yes, I believe that Karoline's supposed to announce those changes to the briefing room at the top of the press briefing. And they were not very happy. And they started to freak out about the potential changes and how that could affect their privilege sitting in those seats. And so I found that to be really hilarious. But what's going to be happening is there are a couple of seats that are off to the side right next to the lectern in the briefing room. And that's typically where Karoline's staff will sit and watch her do the briefing. but they're going to be taking those seats and opening them up to new media. And so that is anybody who does not have a seat in the briefing room, but I believe is with a news organization, can apply to sit in those seats and ask a question of the press secretary. And it sounds like from the briefing it's going to be on some sort of rotating basis. She called them Breitbart and Axios. Those were the two outlets in that those new media seats today.
Yeah.
They were first. And one more thing, if I could, what is really symbolic about her calling on them first is that it's like this unwritten rule that the press secretary always starts with the Associated Press for the briefings. They're front and center, and they always get the first question. And for her to toss those two questions to the first two questions to this new media, I just was dying to know how the front row was reacting, because it's probably bruised to their ego.
Yeah, for sure. Although I will say I chuckled. I heartily laughed, actually, when she called on Mike Allen first, because Mike Allen, of all people, Mike Allen has been around this town for a very long time. He's not exactly new media, He's at Axios now, but he was a Politico guy, and I like Mike, but like he's not like some new media figure, but it is funny. But she called on him first.
Yeah. I honestly don't get the appeal of Axios or why they're kind of the new media. I saw someone on Twitter really briefly mention like a Vanity Fair article where he was kind of encouraging his reporters to not attend the briefing room for the press briefings, and now he's in the briefing room himself.
That's funny.
And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like some of the reporters at Axios, and that's essentially as far as that goes for me.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, one other thing I was personally tickled by today is that I counted 5 either current or former Daily Caller reporters who were all called on today in the White House press briefing, which made me very joyful. I was very happy about that. And I was happy especially that you got a chance to mix it up. So do you have a sense of how frequently Karoline Leavitt is going to be doing this? Because President Trump is actually very available to the press. So it seems like she may not have to do this quite as often as you might expect.
Yeah, that's kind of the answer she gave today when she was asked about this by Phil Wegman. And, kind of what I've heard in my conversations with the White House, that when the president is not taking questions himself, that she will appear. But over the last week, Trump's first week in office, he has taken questions from reporters 11 times. And it wasn't just, one question here or there. They were all for almost 10, 15, 20, 30, 45 minutes. Where he's taking a bunch of questions, engaging them back and forth. And so when you get to that point, you don't really need to talk to the spokesperson for the president if you can just speak to the president himself. But, the media, the mainstream media really loves their couple minutes of fame in the briefing room. So I'm sure we're going to see some sort of fit if they don't get the briefing room press briefings, even if they get to talk to Trump all the time.
Right, because in the end, it's about, me. It's the whole thing is is an exercise in narcissism. How can I be on camera asking a question? And unfortunately, it's really distorted what the obligation of that room is supposed to be, which is to produce useful information for the American people, which you did today. Thank you very much, Reagan Reese, over at the Daily Caller. Always great to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Of course, Reagan Reese, White House correspondent at the Daily Caller. Let's see. Connor is calling in from Huntsville, Alabama, on line 4. Connor, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Gallahney Show.
Hey, Vince. Rush Limbaugh rule number 1 is that the caller's responsibility to make the host look good. So here's a shot, bud. It was clear that the regular media was going to try and steamroll Ms. Leavitt.
Uh-huh.
So do you think that she did enough to own the room and set the tone for the future?
I think she fully succeeded in that mission today, Connor, because she didn't allow the press to dictate the terms of the debate. And that was especially proven true when she was asked about, just how many of these undocumented immigrants are criminals? And she responded, all of them. Every single one. If you illegally cross into our country, you've committed a crime, she explained very patiently. And it was refreshing to hear someone stand up at that lectern and actually tell the truth. And you know what's funny, Connor? Right at the top, one of the legacy media reporters asked her whether or not she would promise to always tell the truth in that briefing room. And I was laughing out loud. And she responded in kind, and she said, "You have to promise to do the same thing," which I think is going to be tough for them to keep.
Without calling them a liar.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I thought she did great. I was really impressed. She's only 27 years old, and she's handling it like an old pro, Connor. She looked good today.
That was amazing. Thanks a lot, Vince. Appreciate your opinion.
Thanks very much, Connor. Thanks for making me look good. 4:51 now. Among the many things Karoline Leavitt discussed today, she gave an update on the mystery drones in New Jersey. This is a message directly from the president, she explained.
From President Trump directly, an update on the New Jersey drones. After research and study, the drones that were flying over New Jersey in large numbers were authorized to be flown by the FAA for research and various other reasons. Many of these drones were also hobbyists, recreational, and private individuals that enjoy flying drones. In time, it got worse due to curiosity. This was not the enemy.
Okay, so that's good news, not the enemy. But here's what's revealed here, to the extent that we know much more about anything. We now know officially that the Biden administration was lying. We have no idea. We're looking into this. We're not sure. We're trying to get to the bottom of it. We have no idea. Bull. The FAA had authorized all of these flights. They have their mission lights on. You can see them in midair. The FAA knew the whole time what these drones were. Notice there's still some vagaries being delivered. Perhaps it was some sort of government mission President Trump would like to continue to keep secret. But for now, he's saying, it's not the enemy. The FAA authorized all of these. I just wanted you to know. And he did promise he would get to the bottom of it. Here's the assessment, just a week into his presidency. Stay with us.